My father struck me across the face during his own birthday celebration, and 2 weeks later a courtroom stripped him of everything he owned. The champagne glasses froze mid-air. 30 guests in designer outfits watched the man of the hour, Gerald, a respected insurance manager, raise his hand and bring it down on my cheek. The sound echoed off the patio walls, a sharp crack that sliced through the laughter. I was 18 years old and had spent 16 hours preparing for his party, scrubbing floors, pressing linens, arranging floral centerpieces, all before sunrise. I didn't cry when he hit me. I stood there with the copper taste of blood in my mouth. A cheap leather wallet I'd saved 3 months to buy lying on the flagstone, and I realized in that instant that my life had just split into 2 parts. Before the slap. And after. But before I reveal what happened next, let me tell you exactly what led to that moment. If you've ever felt like the invisible one in your own home, someone who exists to serve, but never to be seen, I need you to know this story is for you. You were never the problem. You were just surrounded by people who needed you to be small. My name is Hillary. For the first 21 years of my existence, Gerald called me Allison. I woke at 4:30 every morning, same as always, but this Saturday had special instructions taped to the refrigerator. A full page of Donna's precise cursive, detailing every task for the upcoming celebration. Clean the patio stone by stone. Unfold exactly 32 chairs for the expected guests. Press the tablecloth so the creases were invisible to the eye. Juice lemons until the pitcher was full. Hand wash the serving platters because the dishwasher left spots, and Gerald noticed everything. Their home was picture perfect, a 4-bedroom colonial on a quiet street with a lawn that Gerald paid someone to maintain, but told everyone I mowed. The dining table was solid oak, seating 12, polished weekly by my hands. On the counter sat 2 cases of expensive Napa Valley wine and a 3-tier birthday cake from a bakery that charged more for the fondant than I made in a week. My living quarters were downstairs. Not a finished basement, but a converted storage closet next to the water heater. No windows, only a twin mattress Gerald had pulled from a neighbor's trash pile when I was 9 and a thin blanket that never lost its smell of damp cardboard. Megan, Gerald's biological daughter, occupied the upstairs master suite. Queen-sized bed. Flat-screen television, a vanity mirror surrounded by Hollywood-style bulbs. 23 years old, still living at home, still had Gerald's credit card in her wallet, still couldn't boil water because that was my job. I'd been saving for Gerald's gift for months, a genuine leather wallet from a department store downtown. $84. A fortune when you're earning $11 an hour scraping burnt food off sheet pans at Rosie's Diner. I wrapped it in brown paper because I couldn't afford a gift bag. It was the last thing I ever gave that man. Gerald made his grand entrance at 10 in the morning, Ralph Lauren polo with the pony logo, creased khakis. So much cologne I smelled him before I saw him. He inspected the patio like a general reviewing his troops, adjusted one of my balloon clusters by 6 inches, studied the lemon slices I'd placed on the water pitcher and said, without looking at me, "These are uneven. Start again." Donna appeared at noon, hair professionally blown out, pearl earrings, a linen dress she'd ordered online and made me steam. She ran her finger along the kitchen countertop and whispered something to Gerald I wasn't supposed to hear, but did anyway. "That girl only got you something cheap. Better brace yourself." Megan arrived last, because of course she did. New dress, new highlights, new heels clicking across the floor I'd waxed at sunrise. She handed Gerald an Apple Watch, top-of-the-line stainless steel, retail price $700. She'd charged it to the emergency credit card Gerald had given her. Gerald beamed, kissed her forehead, and told the first guests arriving that this is my girl. She always knows what her father likes. He didn't look at me. He never did when others were watching. I was the invisible girl who carried trays, refilled glasses, wiped condensation rings off the table before they could stain. When a guest from Gerald's office asked Donna why I wasn't sitting down to eat with everyone, Donna smiled that practiced smile of hers, warm as a locked door, and explained she prefers helping. She has such a grateful heart. You know how it is with adopted children. I kept carrying trays. The incident occurred during the gift exchange. Gerald positioned himself at the head of the table like a king on a throne. 30 guests gathered around him, neighbors, church acquaintances, colleagues from the insurance agency where he held court. Champagne flutes caught the fairy lights strung across the patio. Megan perched on the arm of Gerald's chair, filming the entire spectacle on her phone. Donna stood behind him, one hand on his shoulder, radiating the image of a woman who had her life completely under control. I approached with my brown paper package, my handwriting spelling out "Happy Birthday, Dad" in my neatest script. Gerald took it, weighed it in his palm. I remember hoping he might actually smile. He did that sometimes, when no one could accuse him of going soft. He tore off the paper, pulled out the wallet, flipped it open, then closed it and held it up like evidence at a trial. "What kind of worthless junk did you bring me?" The chatter stopped. Forks paused in midair. Someone set down a glass too carefully. I started to explain. "I saved for 3 months. 3 months and this is what you offer me?" He stood, his chair scraping against the stone. Even the dog gets better presents. He struck me, open palm, across the left side of my face. The sound was flat and final, the kind that doesn't echo because it doesn't need to. My head snapped to the side. A champagne flute fell from someone's hand and shattered on the patio. For a moment, that was the only sound in the world. No one moved. Donna stared at her plate. A man from Gerald's office studied his napkin intently. Megan bit her lip and kept recording. One person stood. Ruth Kessler, the 70-year-old neighbor from next door, barely 5 feet tall. Gerald, that was uncalled for. "Stay out of my family's business." Ruth sat back down, but she didn't look away from me. I've never forgotten that. I didn't return to the party. I retreated to my storage closet room, pulled a faded backpack off the wall hook, frayed at the zipper, the only possession that had followed me through high school. I packed 2 shirts, 1 pair of jeans without holes, a toothbrush, a phone charger, and an envelope I'd found in a discarded box the previous spring with a state logo I didn't fully comprehend. From inside a shoebox under my mattress, I gathered $340 in cash, mostly 1s and 5s from diner tips, hidden because Gerald monitored my bank account. A backpack. A bruise already blooming on my cheekbone. That was everything I owned in the world. I walked through the living room on my way out. The party had resumed. Gerald was laughing at something someone had said. Champagne in hand, the wallet nowhere to be seen. Megan was showing guests something on her phone, presumably the video. Donna stood at the window and watched me cross the front yard. She reached for the curtain and pulled it shut. Nobody called my name. Outside, the October air hit my face, and the sting on my cheek flared like a second strike. Henrico County at 9 in the evening is a darkness you don't find in the city. Not the kind where bodegas glow on every corner, but a suburb dark where streetlights are spaced too far apart and the silence between houses feels intentional. I walked along Patterson Avenue with no destination, just a way. Behind me, the party music faded until only the bass notes remained, and then nothing at all. I'd made it maybe 2 miles when headlights slowed behind me. A black Cadillac Escalade, tinted windows, Virginia plates. It rolled to a stop 10 feet ahead of me. The rear door opened. Every instinct screamed run. But I was so tired of fleeing from things. I thought maybe just once I'd find out what was running toward me. A man stepped out first, mid-50s, tall, lean, wearing a charcoal peacoat that looked custom-fitted, brown hair threaded with silver. His eyes, hazel green and wide-set, catching the streetlight, were the exact shade I saw in my bathroom mirror every morning. Behind him, a woman, shorter, red-haired, sharp features, carrying a leather portfolio like she'd just left a courtroom. She maintained her distance. Professional, watchful, the man's hands were trembling. I could see it even in the half-darkness. "I'm sorry to frighten you," he said. His voice cracked on the second word. "My name is Richard Whitford. I believe I'm your biological father." My back hit a mailbox post. "That's impossible. My birth parents didn't want me. That's what I was told. You were lied to." He reached into his coat and withdrew a photograph, small and worn, creased at the corners, clearly handled 1,000 times. A woman holding a toddler. The woman had auburn hair and cheekbones like mine, a smile that tilted slightly to the left. The toddler had hazel green eyes. "Her name was Catherine," he said. "Your mother. She died in a car accident when you were 2. I've spent every single day since trying to find you." I looked at the photograph, then at him, then back at the photograph. The woman in it had my mouth, my tilt of the head. Seeing her felt like finding a word you'd been searching for your entire life. A NA test can't measure what it feels like to find your own reflection in a stranger's eyes. The red-haired woman spoke. "I'm Margaret Hale, Mr. Whitford's attorney. We're not here to take you anywhere you don't choose to go. We've been monitoring your situation through legal channels for months. Tonight, when our investigators observed you leaving the house, we approached." I touched my cheek without thinking. The bruise pulsed under my fingertips. Richard Whitford looked at the mark on my face, and something behind his eyes broke, in a quiet way I didn't fully understand until much later. We sat in the back of the Escalade, Richard on one side, me on the other, Margaret in the front passenger seat with her portfolio open. The engine hummed, the heat on low. It was the warmest I'd felt all night. Richard spoke like a man who'd rehearsed this confession for 18 years and still wasn't ready to deliver it. Catherine had died on Interstate 64 on a Tuesday morning in March. A delivery truck crossed the median. She was killed instantly. Richard had been in the passenger seat, shattered pelvis, collapsed lung. 4 months hospitalized. I had been at home with a neighbor. While Richard was in the ICU, Child Protective Services placed me in emergency foster care. Standard procedure when no parent is available. But when Richard recovered and filed to bring me home, a social worker named Leonard Grubb told the family court that Richard had signed a voluntary relinquishment of parental rights, surrendering custody permanently. A signed form appeared. The judge approved the adoption. "I never signed anything," Richard said. "I was on a ventilator. Could barely hold a pen, let alone read legal documents. but the court had a piece of paper with my name on it, and that was enough. By the time Richard hired a lawyer to challenge the ruling, the adoption was finalized. The file was sealed. His daughter had a new name, a new family, a new life somewhere in Virginia he wasn't allowed to know about. So I hired investigators. Year after year. I don't know what I spent. I would have spent everything. His voice didn't waver when he mentioned money. It broke on the word everything. Leonard Grubb, I said. How much did they pay him? Richard looked at Margaret. She closed her portfolio and said, "That's exactly what we intend to prove in court." The Escalade was still parked on Patterson Avenue, hazard lights blinking amber against the darkness. I sat with my backpack on my lap, clutching the straps like a child on the first day of school, and I told them about the envelope. The previous spring, Gerald had decided Megan needed a yoga studio in the house. That meant clearing the storage closet, my room, and moving my belongings to an even smaller corner by the furnace. He threw most of my possessions into a garbage bag and left it at the curb. I went through the bag before the garbage truck arrived, the way you learn to do when nothing you own is safe. At the bottom of a water-damaged cardboard box, underneath old report cards and a Ziploc of baby clothes, I found a manila envelope, official-looking, with a return address that read Virginia Department of Social Services. Inside was a single document, partially redacted, titled Title 4E Adoption Assistance Monthly Disbursement Summary. Across the top, typed in plain government font, Allison G. Talbot. I didn't understand what it meant. But I knew my name was on a government document Gerald had never shown me. I'd been carrying it for 6 months without knowing why. I handed it to Margaret. She unfolded it under the dome light, and I watched her expression shift. Not dramatically, but like a poker player's face when the final card reveals itself. "This is the adoption subsidy record," she said. "The state has been paying Gerald and Donna Talbot approximately $810 per month for your care and maintenance. For 18 years. She met my eyes. Roughly $175,000 total. How much of that did you ever see?" I thought of the mattress from the curb, the blanket that smelled like cardboard, the closet with no window. "None," I said. Richard turned his face toward the window, and in the reflection, I could see him clench his jaw so hard the muscle jumped. "All those years," I said, half to myself, "he called me a burden." But I wasn't a burden. I was a paycheck. Margaret drove us to a Hilton off Broad Street, not a shelter, just a place that was clean and quiet and safe. Richard checked us in under his name. Separate rooms with an adjoining door. I stood in the middle of mine and didn't know what to do. The bed had white sheets that smelled like detergent, not mildew. There was a window. I opened the curtains and simply looked out at the parking lot lights, because looking out a window from my own room was something I hadn't done in years. As I stood there, memories surfaced in layers. I'd started cooking the family meals when I was 10. Gerald said it was to teach me responsibility. By 12, I was doing all the laundry, all the dishes, all the grocery shopping on foot, because Gerald wouldn't drive me. Megan got a Toyota Camry for her 16th birthday. I got a bus pass that expired after 1 month because no one renewed it, so I walked 90 minutes each way to Rosie's for my shifts. Gerald never let me keep my own identification. No birth certificate. No social security card. No state ID. When I asked for a driver's license at 17, he said, "What for? You have nowhere to go." At the time, I thought he was right. Now I understood he'd designed it that way. Why did Gerald keep me all those years if he despised me? Why not send me back into the system? If I was so worthless, why hold on? Now I had my answer. $810 a month. Have you ever known someone who seemed to hate you, but refused to let you go? Someone who treated you like garbage, but held on like you were treasure? If you have, write it in the comments, because I suspect you already understand that equation. Donna's voice echoed in my head, sweet and cutting as lemon juice on a wound. Gratitude, Allison. That's all we've ever asked. Is that really so hard? No, Donna. What was hard was realizing I'd been grateful to people who had been stealing from me the entire time. Let me go back 2 weeks before the party, before the slap, before any of this. Because Gerald had already revealed who he truly was. I just didn't have the words for it then. It was a Tuesday evening. Gerald summoned me to his home office, the room no one entered without permission. Mahogany desk, leather chair, a shelf of hardcover books he'd never read, arranged by color. He sat behind the desk like a judge with a manila folder open in front of him. Sit down, he said. Not have a seat. He pushed a document across the desk, 10 or 12 pages, dense print, a blue signature tab protruding from the bottom. This is a voluntary agreement. It states that you choose to remain under my guardianship since you're not financially or emotionally capable of independent living. Sign it. I picked it up. Most of the language was impenetrable, but one clause on page 4 I understood perfectly. The agreement authorized Gerald to continue managing all state and federal benefits tied to my care. He wanted me to sign over the subsidy again, this time voluntarily, so he could keep collecting even after I aged out of the system. Why do I need to sign this? I asked. Gerald's expression didn't change, because without this family, you'd be homeless. No degree, no savings, no ID. So you're going to sign this, and you're going to sign it before my birthday. Consider it your gift to me. I didn't sign. I asked for more time. Gerald said nothing. He simply closed the folder and placed it back in the drawer, slowly, the way someone puts a loaded weapon in a safe. That's why he hit me at the party. It wasn't about the wallet. It was never about the wallet. The hit wasn't about the gift. It was about the word I'd learned to say. No, it was because I'd refused him for the first time in 18 years, and he couldn't tolerate that. Back at the Hilton the next morning, I woke at 5 out of habit, heart pounding, mentally cataloging chores before I remembered. There was no list. Just a hotel room with white sheets and a window full of gray October sky. A knock on the adjoining door. Richard, already dressed, holding 2 cups of coffee from the lobby. He placed one on the desk and sat in the chair across the room. Not close, not far, just present. Like he was afraid that if he moved too fast, I'd disappear again. Margaret arrived at 8 with a garment bag. Inside, new jeans and a cream-colored cashmere sweater, tags still attached. Something clean to wear, she said, practical as always. I took them into the bathroom and stood in front of the mirror for a long time. It was the first time in my life I was wearing anything that no one else had worn first. When I came out, Richard's eyes reddened at the edges, but he didn't cry. He just nodded. Catherine had that same look, like she was deciding whether to trust the mirror. I sat on the edge of the bed and said what I'd been thinking all night. I need proof. Not the photo, not the story. A DNA test. If you're who you say you are, the science will prove it. If you're not, I need to know that too. Richard didn't flinch. Of course, Margaret's already located an accredited lab in Richmond. We can go today. No hesitation, no offense, No guilt, just of course. I'd spent 21 years in a house where asking a question was treated as insubordination, and here was a man who answered as if questions were the most natural thing in the world. "I've spent my whole life obeying," I said. "If I'm going to trust you, it'll be because I choose to, not because I have nowhere else to go." Richard set down his coffee. That's exactly how it should be. The lab was a low brick building off Carey Street, clean and clinical. A technician swabbed the inside of my cheek. Then, Richards labeled the vials. Results would take 3 to 5 business days. 5 days. I'd waited 21 years to learn who I was. 5 more felt like holding my breath underwater. While we waited, Richard brought things to the hotel. Not gifts, not transactions with strings attached, but pieces of a life. An album of photographs, Catherine pregnant, laughing on a porch swing with one hand on her belly. Catherine holding a newborn with a pink hat. Richard and Catherine, and a baby in front of a brick bungalow in Richmond's fan district with a red door. The baby had hazel green eyes, even then. "That's the house you came home to," Richard said. "I still own it. Couldn't bring myself to sell it. I studied each image like a document to memorize. My mother's face, her hands, the way she stood with weight on her left foot. The same way I stand without thinking about it." "She's beautiful," I said. "You look exactly like her," he said, "especially in the eyes." On the 5th day, Margaret called while I sat on the hotel bed with the album open to a photo of Catherine blowing out birthday candles. 99,998% probability of paternity, Margaret said. "Richard Whitford is your biological father." I didn't say anything for a while. I just held the phone and looked at the photograph and felt something open inside me, not break, not shatter, but open the way a door opens when someone finally turns the handle from the other side. 99,998%, a number. But for me, it was the first proof in 21 years that I wasn't an accident no one wanted. Margaret's voice returned, steady and precise. "Now, we have enough. Next stop is family court." Here's what I learned later through court filings from Ruth Kessler's testimony. From the texts, Donna eventually surrendered. The morning after the party, Gerald had called the Henrico County Police and reported me missing. Not because he was worried, because he was calculating. The officer who responded checked my information and told Gerald the news he didn't want to hear. I was 21, a legal adult. If I'd left voluntarily, there was no missing person case. "She didn't leave voluntarily," Gerald told the officer. "She's mentally unfit, can barely function without supervision." The officer asked if Gerald had any documentation, a diagnosis, a guardianship order, anything legal. Gerald didn't. Because I wasn't mentally unfit, I was just controlled. That night, according to Donna's texts, Gerald paced the living room for 3 hours. Donna typed what he dictated. "Gerald, if that girl talks to anyone, a lawyer, CPs, anyone, we're finished. Find the adoption file. All of it. The originals." Gerald knew. He'd always known. The forged signature. The bribed caseworker. The subsidy he'd been collecting for 18 years on a child he treated like hired help. He carried it all in his head the way some men carry debt, constantly aware, constantly managing. Never once considering the foundation might collapse. Gerald wasn't afraid of losing me. He was afraid of what I'd discover once I was free. He didn't realize that the man he should have been afraid of, the man who'd spent 18 years and a private investigator's retainer looking for his daughter, was sitting 20 minutes away in a Hilton, assembling a file 3 inches thick. Margaret spread the documents across the hotel desk like a surgeon laying out tools. This was the second time I saw the evidence, but now it had teeth. "Look at this," she said, sliding a photocopied form toward me. The voluntary relinquishment of parental rights, dated October 2005. At the bottom, a signature. Richard A. Whitford, neat, deliberate, forward-leaning. Then she placed a second sheet beside it, a certified report from a forensic document examiner who had compared the relinquishment signature to 12 known samples of Richard's handwriting. "The pen pressure is inconsistent," Margaret said, tracing the signature. "The letter formation doesn't match." The examiner concluded that the signature was produced by a different hand with a high degree of certainty. Then she pulled a third document, a bank record from Leonard Grubb's personal checking account. On October 14, 2005, 6 days before the adoption was finalized, a deposit of $5,000 appeared. The source? A wire transfer from Gerald R. Talbot's personal account. "Not through the church," Margaret said. "Direct account to account." 1 week before the adoption was approved. I stared at the numbers. $5,000. The cost of my entire identity, my name, my father, my childhood. Traded for the price of a used car. Richard sat across the room, arms folded, jaw tight. He'd seen these documents before, but watching me see them was different. I could tell by the way he breathed, shallow and careful, like a man trying not to break something by holding it too tightly. I was worth $5,000 to him, but $175,000 over 18 years? He couldn't let that walk away. "So the adoption can be undone?" I asked. Margaret closed the file. "In Virginia, an adoption procured through fraud, including forged consent, can be declared void. Yes, it can be undone." 2 days before the court date, a letter arrived at the Hilton's front desk addressed to Allison Talbot, Gerald's insurance agency letterhead. Handwritten inside was a photograph of me at 3 years old, sitting on Gerald's lap in the living room of the cul-de-sac house, wearing a pink dress I didn't remember. He was smiling. I was smiling. It looked like a family. The letter read, "Allison, I don't know who this man is or what he's told you. But he's not your father. He's a stranger exploiting a confused young woman. We're your family. We have been for 18 years. Come home. We can work this out. I forgive you for leaving." Dad, I read it 3 times. The word forgive hit differently each time. First like a door opening, then like a lock closing, then like a hand gripping my wrist. He forgave me for leaving after he hit me. I sat on the edge of the bed and felt the room tilt. 18 years of conditioning doesn't vanish because a DNA test says 99.998%. Somewhere inside, a voice I'd carried since childhood whispered, "What if Gerald's right? What if this is all a trick? What if Richard just wants something from you too?" I looked at Richard, who was reading in the chair by the window. "How do I know you're not the same as him? How do I know you won't just use me for something else?" He put the book down. He didn't look hurt. He looked like a man who understood exactly why I needed to ask. "You don't," he said. "Not yet, and I'm not going to try to convince you with words. Because words are cheap. The DNA doesn't lie. The documents don't lie. The court will decide what's true. All I'm asking is that you let the evidence speak." He picked up his book and returned to reading. That absence of pressure, the space he gave me, scared me most because it was so different from everything I knew. That night, I couldn't sleep. I did what I always did when the world stopped making sense. I examined the evidence. I placed the Title 4E envelope on the desk beside Gerald's letter. 2 documents. One from the state confirming Gerald received $810 a month to care for me. One from Gerald claiming he was my family. If Gerald loved me, why had I slept in a storage closet? If Gerald loved me, why didn't I have a birth certificate or any identification with my name? If Gerald loved me, why was the guardianship extension he'd made me sign designed to continue the subsidy? Not to keep me safe? The answer was in the math. It had always been in the math. Gerald didn't love me. Gerald invoiced me. I called Margaret at 11 that night. She picked up on the second ring. I'm going to court, I said. Not because I trust Richard completely, not yet, but because I deserve the truth. I've earned that. That's all we need, she said. The next afternoon, Derek Simmons arrived at the hotel, a social worker from the Virginia Department of Social Services, assigned to review Richard's petition. He asked about my living conditions growing up. I told him about the closet, the chores, the missing documents, the isolation. He wrote everything in a small notebook. When I finished, he didn't say, "I'm sorry," or "that must have been hard." He said, "What you're describing, if corroborated by records, constitutes neglect. The financial component constitutes exploitation of adoption assistance funds." Then he added, more quietly, "This isn't just about your adoption being fraudulent, Miss Whitford. This is about a system that failed to protect you." I told myself I wasn't choosing Richard over Gerald. I was choosing the truth over the lie I'd been living. I didn't witness this part directly, but it came out later through Donna's testimony. The night before the hearing, Gerald rehearsed his testimony with his lawyer, a general practitioner from a strip mall who'd never handled adoption fraud in his life. I have all the paperwork, signed, sealed, stamped by the court. I'm a member of First Baptist. I coach Little League. Everyone in this community knows who I am. Donna asked, "What about the subsidy envelope? What if they ask about the money?" Gerald dismissed her. "Nobody audits that. We're fine." Megan wandered through on her way to the kitchen and asked, "If Allison doesn't come back, can I turn her room into a closet?" Gerald didn't answer. The morning of the hearing, Margaret transformed the hotel conference room into a war room. 5 stacks of documents, each flagged with colored tabs. I sat at one end with a cup of coffee cooling in my hands. "Stack 1, she said, tapping the first pile. "Nah, results. 99,998%. Irrefutable, stack 2. Forensic handwriting analysis. The signature on the relinquishment isn't Richard's. Stack 3. Financial records. Gerald received approximately $174,960 in adoption assistance over 18 years. Stack 4. Derek Simmons's full report. Child neglect findings. No medical records after age 14. No identification documents. Living conditions inconsistent with subsidy purposes. Stack 5. A sworn declaration from Ruth Kessler, who witnessed the slap and will testify to the unequal treatment. "Do I have to speak in court?" I asked. Margaret met my eyes. "Only if you choose to." The paperwork speaks for itself. Richard, silent throughout the briefing, finally spoke. "Whatever happens in there, you've already won. You're free." Richard took me shopping that afternoon, not because the clothes mattered, but because he said, "You should walk into that room looking exactly like who you are. Someone who deserves to be heard." I tried on a navy blazer, a white silk blouse, charcoal slacks. I stood in front of the mirror and stared at the person looking back. Straight shoulders. Clear eyes. Someone who belonged at a conference table, not carrying trays to one. I looked in the mirror and saw someone who belonged at the table, not under it. Your mother used to do that, Richard said when I came out. Stand in front of the mirror for a long time. Then smile, just a little, like she'd settled something. On the drive back, Richard pointed to a brick bungalow on a tree-lined street. Red door. White shutters. A porch swing still in the October air. That's the house, the one in the photos. I looked through the window at the place I'd been born into, the place I'd been taken from. I didn't feel the ache I expected. I felt something quieter. Recognition that sits in the body instead of the mind. That night, I wrote in a notebook I'd bought at the CV's, no matter what happens tomorrow, I will never return to that storage closet. I will never answer to a name that isn't mine. I will never be grateful for being used. I slept 4 hours and dreamed of a red door opening. Richmond Family Court. A Tuesday morning in late October. The building was old federal brick with echoing hallways. I arrived with Richard on my left, Margaret on my right, and Derek Simmons behind me carrying a banker's box of records. Navy blazer, white blouse, hair pulled back in a low knot, no jewelry, but my hands were steady. Gerald arrived at 8:40, gray suit, burgundy tie. Donna on his arm in her Ann Taylor dress. Megan trailing behind in something too casual for court. His lawyer carried a single folder. Gerald carried his chin at the angle of a man who believed this was just a formality. Then, his eyes found me. The blazer. The posture. The absence of the girl who used to stare at the floor. Then, he saw Richard, Margaret, and the box Derek was setting on the plaintiff's table. Gerald's face didn't crumble. It recalibrated, rapid mental arithmetic, realizing he'd missed a variable. The clerk opened the courtroom doors and called the case. In the matter of the adoption of the minor formerly known as Hilary Whitford, now styled Allison Grace Talbot. We walked in through the same door, different worlds. Margaret stood like a scalpel, upright, precise, reflecting light. She addressed Judge Patricia Dwyer without notes. Your Honor, we present evidence that the adoption of Hilary Whitford was obtained through fraud, specifically forging the biological parent's consent and bribing the assigned social worker. She presented the DINA results first. The lab technician's affidavit. The number 99.998%. Judge Dwyer examined the report, adjusted her glasses, and set it aside with a small nod. Then, Margaret introduced the forensic handwriting analysis. Dr. Elaine Marsh's 46-page report, condensed to its final paragraph, it is my professional opinion that the signature on the voluntary relinquishment of parental rights was not produced by Richard A. Whitford, Gerald's lawyer rose. Your Honor, my client has a legally executed adoption decree approved by this court nearly 2 decades ago. The petitioner is attempting to relitigate on a hired expert's opinion. Margaret didn't turn around. Your Honor, a decree built on a forged signature is not settled. It is concealed. We are here to unconceal it. Judge Dwyer looked at Gerald's lawyer over her glasses. The court will hear the petitioner's full presentation. Continue, Miss Hale. Margaret moved to the financial records. She projected the Title IV disbursement summary onto the screen. Month by month, year by year. Mr. Talbot, the state of Virginia paid your household $810 per month for 18 years, totaling $174,960 for the care of the child placed with you. Can you tell the court how those funds were allocated toward her welfare? Gerald straightened. Everything went to the girl. We fed her, clothed her, kept a roof over her head. 18 years of that isn't cheap. Margaret nodded, as if expecting this. She had. Then, she called Derek Simmons. He approached the stand and testified without inflection. The child's living space was a converted storage area, approximately 60 square feet, no exterior window, no closet. The mattress was water-damaged, consistent with curbside salvage. I found no medical records after age 14, no pediatric visits, no dental records, no immunizations after 8th grade. The child had no state-issued identification, no social security card in her possession, no access to her own adoption file. In my professional assessment, these living conditions constitute child neglect, inconsistent with the intended use of adoption assistance funds. Donna began crying softly at first, then louder. Gerald squeezed her hand and set his jaw, projecting the image of a husband protecting a fragile wife from unfair accusations. But Ruth Kessler was next. She took the stand in a navy cardigan and sensible flats, and she didn't perform. I've lived next door for 12 years. I watched that girl mow their lawn, wash their cars, hang laundry while the other daughter sunbathed. I never once saw Allison, Hillary, sit at their dinner table when guests were present. On Gerald's birthday, I watched him strike her across the face because she gave him a gift he thought was beneath him. The courtroom went quiet. Margaret waited for Ruth to step down, then turned back to Gerald. Mr. Talbot, do you know a man named Leonard Grubb? Gerald didn't blink. No. Margaret produced a photograph printed on glossy stock. 2 men at a folding table. One was Gerald, 10 years younger, holding a paper plate. The other was a thin man with glasses and a Virginia Desists lanyard. This was taken at the First Baptist Church community picnic in June 2004, 1 year before the adoption was finalized. The man beside you is Leonard Grubb, the social worker assigned to Hillary Whitford's case. Do you still claim not to know him? Gerald's jaw worked. I may have met him in passing. Church events are large. I don't remember every face. You remembered well enough to send him $5,000. Margaret placed the bank statement on the projector. Gerald's personal checking account. October 14th, 2005, wire transfer. Recipient. Leonard M. Grubb. Can you explain this payment? That was a donation for the churches. It was a donation routed from your personal account directly to Mr. Grubb's personal account, not the church's. Gerald turned to his lawyer, who studied the table with the intensity of a man hoping to find an exit there. No objection came. I gave that girl everything. Gerald's voice cracked upward, sharp as a slap. He was standing now. 18 years. A home. Food. And this is the thanks I get? Some con man shows up, and suddenly I'm the villain? Mr. Talbot, Judge Dwyer's voice was low and final. Sit down. Now he sat, but the room had already heard it. The mask cracking, the entitlement spilling through. Margaret turned to the judge with the composure of someone who had just watched her opponent do her job for her. Your Honor, we ask the court to note Mr. Talbot's characterization of his parental role as something he gave and expected repayment for. That is not parenting. That is a transaction. Margaret looked at me. I told her the night before I wanted to speak. Not because the case needed it, the documents were enough, but because I'd been silent for 21 years. Some things need to be said by the person who lived them. Your Honor, the petitioner's daughter would like to address the court. Judge Dwyer nodded. You may proceed. I stood in my navy blazer and white blouse, hands at my sides. I looked at the judge, not at Gerald. Your Honor, I'm not here for revenge. I let the words settle. I'm here because for 21 years I didn't know who I was. I didn't know my own name. I didn't know my mother's face. I didn't know someone had been looking for me. I didn't know the papers that placed me in that house were built on a forged signature. Mr. Talbot said he gave me everything. Here's what everything looked like: a storage closet with no window, a mattress from someone's curb, no doctor visits after age 14, no identification, no birth certificate. I worked in that house from the time I was 8 years old. I cooked, I cleaned, I did laundry. I was told every day to be grateful. Without them, I was nothing. My voice didn't break. I decided it wouldn't. He hit me because I gave him a wallet I'd saved 3 months for. But the truth is, he hit me because I wouldn't sign a paper giving him continued control over my life. That's what I was to him. Not a daughter. A line item. I'm not asking the court to punish Gerald Talbot. I'm asking it to tell the truth. Because I deserve at least that. Every child in the system deserves that. I sat down. The room was silent. Then it happened. Donna stood up. Not from the witness stand. She rose from the respondent's bench, smoothed her Ann Taylor dress, and said, "Your Honor, I have something to say." Gerald grabbed her wrist. "Donna, sit down." She pulled free. The first time I'd ever seen her pull free of anything. "I wrote the check," she said. Mascara running, raw, ugly, genuine, $5,000 to Leonard Grubb. Gerald told me it would expedite the adoption. I knew what it meant. Gerald's lawyer put his head in his hands. "She's lying." Gerald shouted. "She's confused." "I'm trying to protect myself." Donna's voice cracked. "Because I watched you hit that girl. I watched you work her like a mule. And I said nothing because I was afraid of you, Gerald, afraid of exactly this." Judge Dwyer let her finish. The courtroom was so quiet I could hear the fluorescent lights humming. "Mr. Talbot," the judge said, "one more outburst and I will hold you in contempt." Gerald sat still as stone. For the first time in my life, I saw him look afraid. Judge Dwyer took 12 minutes to review the final documents. I counted every second. When she looked up, she addressed me. "Miss Whitford," and I will use that name now. "The court has reviewed the petition, the forensic analysis, the financial records, the social worker's testimony, the DNA results, and Mrs. Talbot's statement. The evidence is unambiguous. The voluntary relinquishment of parental rights bears a signature that has been determined by certified analysis to be fraudulent. The biological father never consented. The adoption was built on forgery and facilitated by a direct payment to the assigned social worker. It is the ruling of this court that the adoption of Hilary Whitford, styled as Allison Grace Talbot, is declared void ab initio. The adoption is annulled in its entirety. Furthermore, Gerald and Donna Talbot are ordered to make full restitution of all Title IV-E adoption assistance funds, totaling $174,960 to the Commonwealth of Virginia. Finally, this matter is referred to the Henrico County District Attorney's Office for potential criminal charges, including forgery, fraud, and child neglect. The child's legal name is restored to Hilary Whitford. Effective immediately. Court is adjourned. The gavel came down. That single wooden knock was the loudest sound I'd ever heard, louder than the slap. Louder than 18 years of silence. It sounded like a lock opening. In the gallery, Ruth Kessler pressed both hands to her mouth. The churchwomen were already standing, gathering their purses, avoiding eye contact. Gerald sat motionless. His lawyer packed up quickly. For the first time, I realized the man Gerald had hired to defend him couldn't leave that room fast enough. In the hallway, Megan caught up to me. Her makeup was ruined, mascara tracking down her cheeks. She looked smaller than I'd ever seen her. "I didn't know," she said, breathless, "about the money, the subsidy. I thought Dad was paying for my school from his salary. I didn't know it was." She couldn't finish. I understood why. The sentence would end with your money. Saying it out loud would make it real. "I hope you figure out who you are without his money, Megan," I said. "I really do. But that's your journey, not mine." She nodded once. I saw something pass across her face. Not guilt exactly, but the beginning of it. Gerald was standing at the bottom of the courthouse steps. He looked diminished. His tie was loosened. Donna sat in their Buick, forehead against the steering wheel. I was halfway down the steps when he called out the name he'd given me. "Allison." I stopped, turned. He looked at me like I was something he owned and couldn't figure out the value of. Now there was something else underneath. "Fear. After everything I did for you," he said. 18 years under my roof. This is how you repay me?" He thought I owed him for my childhood. The judge thought otherwise. I stood on the steps in my navy blazer, October sunlight on my shoulders, and for the first time I felt the full weight of what he'd just said. Even now, with the judge's ruling ringing in the air, with a forensic report proving he'd forged a man's signature to steal his daughter, Gerald Talbot believed he was owed something. "My name is Hillary," I said, "and you didn't do anything for me. You did everything to me. And now, it's over." I turned and walked down the remaining steps. Richard held the escalade door open. I got in. The door closed. The last thing I saw through the tinted glass was Gerald Talbot standing alone, suit jacket hanging open, watching his investment drive away. 6 months later, I live in Richmond, an apartment off Gray Street with tall windows that let in morning light. I stand there for a minute before starting my day. The windows were the first thing I looked for when apartment hunting. I spent 18 years in a room without one. Now I need to see the sky when I wake up. I'm studying for my GED and enrolled in the culinary program at Reynolds Community College. Ironic, I know. Gerald made me cook every meal for 18 years, and now I'm choosing it. But that's the difference between something done to you and something you decide to do. The ingredients are the same. The meaning is completely different. Richard and I have dinner every Sunday at the bungalow. He's not a great cook, but he makes it himself. He sets the table for two, asks about my week, and listens to the answer. We're not perfect. There are awkward silences because you can't recover 18 stolen years over salmon. But he's there, every Sunday, without fail. The Talbots are awaiting trial. The house in Henrico is under a second mortgage to cover the restitution. Gerald was asked to resign from First Baptist's board. Donna's cooperation may reduce her charges. Megan moved in with an aunt and got her first job. I go to therapy every Thursday. Dr. Torres doesn't tell me how to feel. She asks questions and lets me find my own answers. Healing doesn't happen overnight. Some mornings I still wake at 5 with my heart racing, already cataloging chores that don't exist. Then I open the curtains, and there's the sky, and I remember where I am. I want to be clear. This story isn't about revenge. It might look that way. The courtroom, the ruling, the restitution. But revenge means wanting Gerald to suffer as I suffered. I don't want that. I want accountability. Those are different. Revenge is a fire you light hoping it burns someone else. Accountability is simply turning on the lights so everyone can see what was already there. If you're in a family where you're tolerated instead of loved, where your presence is endured not valued, where gratitude means silence and obedience means survival, please hear this. You are not the problem. You never were. The people who made you feel like a burden were carrying their own debts and placed the weight on you because you were small enough to accept it. Accountability isn't revenge. It's just turning on the lights. My name is Hillary Whitford, and for the first time in my life, I know exactly who I am. Thank you for staying with me until the end. If this story stirred something in you, anger, relief, recognition, just the quiet understanding that you've been in a room like that too, please share your thoughts in the comments. I read every one. If you want to hear the story of a woman whose in-laws cast her out on Christmas Eve, that's linked in the description below. Click it. I promise you won't regret it. Until next time, take care of yourself. And if someone is still telling you to be grateful for mistreatment, you have my permission to stop listening. I'm Hillary. I'm 21. And this is the first time I've ever told my own story without asking for permission. Like, subscribe, and if you made it this far, drop a comment telling me where you're watching from. It means more than you know.